Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What? Today we've got Niall Ratcliffe on, and he's a personal brand manager. Hi, Niall.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, mate. You?
Yeah, it's doing well. Working as always, but I never complain when I'm busy. It's always better than not being busy.
100%. Niall, should we jump straight into it? Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
Yeah, so right now I'm currently a personal brand manager at Kurogo. Essentially, breaking that down is just me taking founders, CEOs, and C-suites, and essentially just exposing them to a wider audience. We like to talk of it as you at scale. So we take a person and essentially just digitalize their reputation to the whole world, essentially, which is the basis of my job. I do a few little other things on the side, but I'm sure we'll get into them as we go along.
I think we have actually officially, I said this with, I think, Isabel yesterday. I thought we'd had everyone on from Kurogo, but I think now we actually have ticked every single box.
I think you've got a few more. Like the team's growing and the business is doing great. So there's certainly going to be a few more employed over the next 12 months. So we can keep going with the Kurogo employees. We can keep you busy.
I think we get you guys on because, it was always something we knew about, but we never knew what to call it, I guess. People always talk about you have to put yourself out there and you have to build, your personal reputation, I think is what people used to say. But, talking to yourself and Isabel and Sam and all the team is really showing us that personal branding is so crucial now when you're looking for jobs, when you're looking to build your career and anything like that, right?
Yeah, and it's such a unique industry, and everyone is so tight knit. So everyone you could name in personal branding, the chances are I've known them, which is awesome. But and I think we talked about this prior, but essentially one of the things that attracted me to personal branding was it had a real personal effect on me. Prior to December, I was looking for work and I applied for, I think it was 107 jobs on LinkedIn. I'm talking, I've gone on the link and gone to their website and typed in all the crazy questions they asked. And it was 107 and I didn't get accepted for any of them, 0 interviews. And after that, I actually saw, I think it was Schwab and Ellie on LinkedIn, and they were posting. I thought, this is awesome. They're putting out content I got to know them. And I thought, I'll have a slice of this cake. And I started posting on LinkedIn, and I think it was within 2 months or something of posting on LinkedIn, I had 7 full-time job offers, which was absolutely crazy at the time. Some in personal branding, some in marketing. And that's how I essentially ended up at Kurogo, solely through my personal brand. At the time, admittedly, it was horrendous. And I was posting some horrendous content, like what you'd post on Facebook back in 2012. But it's quite nice to look back at and see that documentation of my journey and see how the little effort or little skill I was putting into it and the actual effect it had, going from 107 declined applications to 7 full-time job offers within the space of 2 months was just a crazy prospect to me and literally sold me on personal branding.
I think this is why, I said we're so obsessed with this right now, but this is hence why we've had, basically a whole team on the podcast, because it is actually such a differentiator and it's a really good time right now to jump on and start doing some of this work. And you mentioned you got, 7 job offers from 2 months of posting content. Let's drill down a bit and actually talk about how you build your content and what you're actually posting, because I'll take LinkedIn, for example. I'm learning to be better at it, but I don't post enough content at all. So what can somebody be doing to really start building their personal brand?
I'd say, and it sounds generic, but the first step to posting your personal brand is posting. I said before, my content I was putting out back in December, which is, not long ago, but it is in my life, what's happened since. It was horrendous. And it was simply just anything that came from my mind. Google would have a Google widget, and I would be like, oh my days, Google has this widget. Here's the stats on Google Trends. Here's the amount of people who clicked on it. And it was maybe a 3 to 4 line post. And it got 2 likes, and one was my mother and one was my brother. And that was it for weeks. But essentially, I just started posting, and through trial and error, you realize, okay, people like this post, people like this post. When you get deep into it and you really want to nail it down, though, I think the biggest misconception is that you always have to add value. And they mistake the fact that people actually just want to get to know you as a person. And Izzy, like Isabel Cowell, is honestly probably my favorite personal brand at the minute, which is a little bit of a bias, but because she does such a good job of simply documenting her journey, and every bit of value she gets, it comes from her journey. She's not saying personal branding helps people do this, here's my stats. She's saying, today, I went on a walk and it really benefited my mental health. You should go on a walk. And that's very basic, but like, it's that sort of theme of like, here's what I've done in my life. And here's how it could maybe benefit you also. And it's just documenting that journey. And people love to be nosy. Like, humans love the gossip. They love to be nosy. So when I post something, prime example, last night I actually posted about my work-life balance. And I just took a photo of myself at the football field, and I was just typing up some work. And that's the sort of content that performs really well on LinkedIn. But it's super authentic. It's a photo I've clearly taken. It's just documenting what I'm doing and explaining to people my values, to a wider audience. And I mentioned before, you at scale, and that's something that we say at Kurogo every day virtually. And it's just literally not being fake, not trying to put yourself as someone you aren't. It's simply, here's who I am, here's what I believe in, here's what I do on a daily basis, and take what you want from it. And I think it's important to realize that we can take lessons from everyone, no matter what their career. And that's why personal branding works, because I can learn from a janitor, and I can also learn from the CEO of $1 billion company.
Have you laid out your beliefs or your, what you think about work or the world, or have you got kind of like a structure? You said, okay, this is what I believe and this is what I'm going to post about, or does it all come naturally? Because I think if people are thinking about posting and they're thinking about going on this career journey and, they want to grow or get into an industry, they might not really know what their thoughts and opinions are. So is there an exercise you've done to say, okay, this is what I think?
Honestly, I would say we all have opinions on some things, and it doesn't necessarily have to relate to your job. I don't talk about personal branding much. Yes, I'm a full-time personal brand manager. So the first thing I'd say is simply talk about what you're thinking about. If you like football and you think that Man United overpaid for Cristiano Ronaldo, talk about it and talk about like why you think that is. And you'll be surprised how much people relate to things that are not work related. The boss of a company or a manager of a company that you really like to work for might actually think the same thing about Cristiano Ronaldo, and you relate on that and not a work topic. But not to expose what we do at Kurogo, but we, sorry, Sam, but for every client we have, we do content pillars, and essentially just things like at the core of what you want to talk about. So for me personally, I talk about marketing campaigns is something I love to talk about. Ageism is another one, which is more like a social issue. And I like to highlight how much like young people in society are sort of not oppressed, because I hate that word, but they definitely at times aren't given the opportunity that they should do. So I'll have like some certain content pillars, and we also have some themes for clients as well. And I have some themes for mine. So that might be, tongue in cheek or authoritative or disciplined. And they're little things that you want to tie back into that. So you want to talk about a content pillar with that theme. So let's say I'm talking about ageism and it's a tongue in cheek one where I'm a little bit sarcastic. So that's the basis of what we do with clients. But I do think when you talk about little structures and things like that, people overthink it and believe like there's kind of a barrier to entry, like they don't understand what to do. So that's like I always push, like just post about things that you're passionate about, and forget that you want to work in HR, forget that you want to work in marketing, just talk about things that are on your mind. Obviously nothing too sporadic, but anything that's on your mind, it will be beneficial for your personal brand.
I think this is quite an important thing to talk about, because obviously we sort of talk about personal branding, and obviously you do it as a job for other people, but you've also mentioned you did it for yourself to help gain yourself a job. And I've done it previously as well, but I'm not a social media person. I can't stand it. I'm not really good at it, and I don't particularly enjoy it. So for what I did was I just started liking, sharing, and commenting on other people's stuff, because I didn't want to post my own sort of thoughts and opinions. And that sort of worked for me. But I'd be quite interested to hear what, for you at that very beginning stage, going from those 107 sort of rejections to getting those 7 job offers, what was it you first started to do to get yourself out there and get your personal brand?
In the end, that's a really interesting point you brought up, and I think it's another thing that people miss is the actual engagement side of things. And essentially, you can put your values out there without posting content. And I talked about this recently in a post, and a company that does this really well is Specsavers on Twitter, and they actually I done the maths on it, and they actually had more engagement from their replies over the month of February than they did from their posts, solely because they jump on the back of other people's values and kind of add like the Specsavers kind of like jokey vibe to it. But it works the same from a personal perspective. So that's really interesting you brought that up. But the question you essentially asked was like, what did I do to start with? And like I said, I have mentioned I did put out content, just like blatantly throwing it out at that, throwing mud at the wall essentially. But I did also jump on networking calls, which is obviously the epitome of a personal brand essentially, because it's just putting yourself out there person to person, and not being afraid to jump on a Zoom call with people, and with no intention other than I'm going to introduce myself, you introduce yourself, and I'm going to tell you how my day is going, you tell me how your day is going. And that was another really beneficial thing at the start, solely for like the engagement purpose of they like will now interact with your content, but also like I've made some like lifelong friends, I'd say, which sounds cliche and cringy, but it is the truth.
So let's talk about university versus jumping straight into work. Did you go to uni? And if not, or if you did you find value in it? Or if you jumped straight into work, why did you?
I love that question. Ironically, I'm still at university. I graduated at Christmas, and I'm working full time at the same time, which is a super unique scenario and kind of one I fell into. I started off part time, and as my role developed, I just became full time. I would say my mother would disagree, but I think university is literally one of the biggest like scams I've ever been involved in a sense of my degree's a marketing degree, and I learned more from December to now than I have done in 3 years of university. And I do believe that university is a huge thing and a great thing for people in certain fields, law, medicine, and fields like that. But for a field like marketing or business, I'm such an advocate of trial and error, and just go and market yourself on LinkedIn, go and market yourself on Twitter, go and volunteer to market a local firm, anything like that, and you will learn so much more than you ever will from a marketing degree. And those key terms and jargon that they pump out in those expensive textbooks, they're dying off. And you talk about the team at Karoga, and I think we have an average age of something like 23. John 20, Izzy's 21, Sam's 22. And and this is an expanding startup and a growing startup, and that's kind of the common theme for the industry. So, and that's why I always talk about ageism on LinkedIn as well, just as a fact of like, not to call out anyone over 20, because I think they add great value, but those barriers to entry with the jargon, not understanding key terms, I do believe that's dying off. And as the new workforce emerges, I think we'll slowly get a more accepting of new people and people with less degrees, and we're seeing that already. So yeah,
that's fair enough. And for you, what do you think are some critical personality traits that you need to be in this industry?
I think one would be disciplined, in a sense of consistency. So vital. You can't just post on LinkedIn, once and then give it 3 months. You have to say to yourself, and this goes for any social platform, LinkedIn's actually the easiest for this. Instagram, if you go off Instagram for 3 months, you might as well write off your engagement for another 3, because they really do punish you. But for any platform, and especially marketing, just like consistently, you have to put out content. You have to do whatever you're doing consistently. And I saw a quote somewhere. It said like being great is just being consistently good. And I think that's like a huge factor, just being disciplined to commit to a certain frequency that you're going to do something, and just consistently do that for a long period of time.
And then what would you say has been the biggest positive or opportunity you've taken so far from working in personal branding?
The biggest opportunity from working within personal branding, I think it's just the people that I've met. Um, we've got clients who are millionaires, people who drive, Ferraris, all the supercars, and the people and I have, personal phone numbers, is absolutely crazy. And sometimes I can sit back and realize, I'm 20 years old and I'm in contact with some of the biggest firms in England, on the highest level, direct access to a CEO, which I think is such a unique aspect that you don't get in any other field. Just as a sense of, you usually go as an intern at 19, 20, and you barely get to talk to your head of department. And just from being in personal branding, you really do get that connection with some really high level people. And from a networking perspective, you couldn't ask for any more from at 20 years old.
And on the flip side of that, what would be some negatives of this industry?
I think the negatives are the fact it is 24/7, 7 days a week. Keeping that reputation going and the consistency I talked about, it can get overwhelming. And I know me and Izzy as well often I like to talk about on LinkedIn about how, you do see a lot of people posting saying this is like great and all this, but you're forgetting that when you do have that viral post or you do have something goes really well, you sit there and that the anxiety does kick in and you do think, oh my God, like I have an audience now, like I need to be really careful at what I say. And it can also like dwindle your authenticity in a sense of you're trying to change yourself to fit the audience. But yes, it's a 24/7 role. And, some days I'll be up at 3 a.m. working and other days I won't. And it is that thing of like when clients need content out the next day, you just have to do that. So it's a 24/7 thing and you're essentially always on call.
What do you think about the old CV versus portfolio? And I think personal branding is probably a really good example of portfolios, to be honest with you, because it's a documented, I've done this, I've done that kind of content stream. How do you feel about CVs? Do you think they're going to have a place going forward, or do you think much more emphasis is going to be put on people's social media and personal brands?
Of course, I think that the personal brands are so much more valuable than CVs. I actually did a talk at my university not 2 weeks ago on just this topic and explaining to other students that there was 1,000 people in the room at the time, and there's 1,000 people here, and you all went to this university, you all studied the same degree, so you're going to apply for jobs in marketing, all of you at the same time, and you're all going to have very similar. Yes, you were in this society, or yes, you did this on the side, but essentially you've all got the same qualification. But I do think that people forget there's so much more opportunity with a CV than just having a piece of paper. And it's something that I was trying to do in the last sort of weeks of me applying for jobs. Was I was trying to really mix up my CV, and I ended up with a QR code that I would hand in. And essentially you were able to scan the QR code and it'd pull up the links to my website, my newsletter, the traditional CV and things like that. And you talked about portfolios as well, which is a similar concept. But essentially, I just think that people forget that CVs aren't just a plain piece of paper where you write down your experience, and people need to get way more creative with it. Although personal branding is more valuable, CVs aren't dying off anytime soon. You're still going to be handing in a CV for the next 20, 30 years. So get creative with it. Don't just hand in a piece of paper, and just really show your personality in the way you put yourself across.
I completely agree with that. I think people, like you say, when you put an A4 piece of paper in, that really doesn't have an effect. Whereas if you were to give someone a QR code, that's really something like, oh, what's this? And that leads to further conversations, isn't it? And it shows your initiative.
Yeah, and I think whichever way you do it, I know Jake Summerhays, he's a Carogo employee. I know he handed in a website, and it wasn't just a website documenting his experience, and it was super authentic to him. And I know he had some testimonials which were from his mum and dad, and he joked around with them, and it was like, the greatest son ever. And it was like mum rescinded and he put on it, and little things like that. And Sam, our CEO, he literally said that was one of the things that really stood out to him when Jake applied. So it just goes to show, expressing yourself through that CV or whatever you hand in is super important.
So I think we talk about personal branding quite a lot on this podcast for the last few months. But, if somebody's been listening to these episodes and they're thinking, do you know, I'd absolutely love to get into personal branding. I think, from the conversations we've had, this is an industry that's only going to grow, only going to expand, because if you're a CEO or a business, having a personal brand is going to be crucial in the next 5 to 10 years. But if somebody's listening and they want to get into it, what should they be doing now?
It's so simple, and that's just build their personal brand. I said there's no barrier to entry. There's people I see every day who put out. I was going to say,
you can swear,
they put out shit content for months upon months, and I think, fucking hell, these are shit content, but it's just missing something little. And then the next month they jump above me in the following, or they jump above me in interactions, because they were just putting it out, and they were putting out this shite content, throwing mud at the wall, and something stuck. And it happens again and again. And you talked about Izzy was on the podcast, and she's just hit something like 13K followers, and she was always putting out good content. But essentially she was putting it out and getting 60, 70 interactions, and now she pulls in 500 to 1,000. And you just think of that size of audience of every time you put out any piece of content, you're getting 1,000 people looking at it. It is just immense. So just start, put out that shite content, talk about something that no one cares about, and just put it out on the platform and do that consistently. And you will have a personal brand in 3 to 6 months, more than likely 3 to 6 weeks, because that's just how quick it is at the minute. And essentially, and once you get into the LinkedIn cult, I call it a cult because it's so close knit, and it's like a high school sometimes, where I could tell you gossip on 90% of the people in my LinkedIn network, and it's just like a cult. Once you're in, and you know everyone. But everyone's so friendly, and if you start interacting with people and putting out content, you'll quickly find yourself. Everyone wants to jump on a Zoom call with you, and everyone knows everyone, which is honestly super nice. And everyone will be so supportive if you ever want advice about anything.
And what would be something that's probably not in your job description, but you have to deal with anyway?
Oof, that's a good question. Not in the job description. I was going to say that, like, I'd hate to genuinely clock my hours, because I'm meant to be 40 hours a week, and it's probably more than that. And it comes it's optional. Sam's not texting me saying work 80 hours this week, Niall. But there you go, Sam. That's the lawsuit covered. But essentially, if, like I said before, if you have to get the content out, you have to get the content out. It could be Saturday, it could be Sunday. Someone might be, something might be going on, and the team do come around and help. But it's just that it is 24/7, and you're going, and you're always thinking. And what I will say is, you'll never enjoy social media like you used to. You don't aimlessly scroll. Every time you're scrolling, it's active consumption. And you're reading people's captions thinking, oh, I like what they did there, I didn't like what they did there. And social media becomes something completely different. And it's not as fun anymore, that's for sure.
And would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Yeah. I wish I would have gone into it sooner. It's an absolute rocket ship. If you look at the startups that have gone to $1 million valuation within the last 6 months, you're talking 4 to 4, I can think of, probably off the top of my head, maybe 3 to 4 that have shot up in the last 6 to 12 months to $1 million valuation, and over the next 6 to 12, that I think will easily double. So it's an absolute rocket ship, and I wish I jumped on board sooner, but it isn't going away anywhere. The industry, from a business perspective, obviously there might not be like as many startups, etc. But I look at the likes of like Elon Musk, who's the richest man in the world, and Tesla is essentially built off his personal brand. People are just now putting a label on it. And you'll see the likes of Jack Mallers, who runs Strike, and other things like this, where these have super strong personal brands, super strong Twitter followings. I mean, the president of El Salvador, the guy has something like 500,000 Twitter followers, and wow. He's become a global sensation, and he is the president, and I think that is the future. And everyone does talk about The Rock and Logan Paul becoming president of the United States, and hopefully it doesn't happen within my lifetime. But within the next 50 to 100 years, I would not be surprised at all if someone becomes president who is solely based off their brand and the presence they brought on social media.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking time to come on and have a chat now. It's been really great to chat to you. Yeah, honestly, absolutely awesome. And I appreciate it, guys.
Well, thank you, Niall. Where can people find you?
So LinkedIn, Niall Ratcliffe, Twitter at Niall Ratcliffe. I also have a newsletter which breaks down marketing strat campaigns and essentially shows small businesses how to implement them. And that is www.growingviral.substack.com. So you can find it there. I post about it on my LinkedIn, so you'll find it there also.
Brilliant. Thanks, mate.